All right, so today let's talk about area, rectangle, squares, and parallelogram. A square is a rectangle, so I'm just gonna look at rectangles done the same way. Now, area in reality, what area means is how many squares can we have in the shape? For example, let's say I had a rectangle that was like this. We can count them. We can count the squares. If you guys see how many squares there are, is 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15. So my area is 15. Now, this shape is actually used in kitchens. You guys can go to your kitchen and usually they come in squares. Now, the measurement that we say is sometimes we say 15 feet squared. Sometimes we might say 15 meter square or 15 miles squared. The measurement that we use, in this case, let me call this feet squared. Now that measurement tells you how big was my square to begin with. Right? If I'm going to measure a room, I'm going to use the squares to be 1 foot by 1 foot. So my measurement is going to be feet squared. If I'm going to measure my phone, I might use my squares to be 1 inch by 1 inch. So my measurement will be inches squared. Now, let's say I was going to measure a land. Let's say I'm going to use a park. No, not a park, but let's say the state of California. Well, I'm not going to do very small squares. I'm going to do miles squares. So my squares are going to be 1 mile by 1 mile. So that's what the measurement means. Now, in reality, I just want us to focus on the number. So for the homework, I'm just going to ask for the number. There's going to be measurements, but you don't have to write the measurements. Now, it's easy when the squares are not that bad. But what if, look in this case, notice how on one side, my rectangle, I had 5 squares going one way, and I had 3 squares going this way. But it wasn't that bad. My numbers were not that bad. But what if I have a rectangle? Let's imagine a rectangle. Well, squares are the same thing, right? What if I have a rectangle that is 15 squares one way, and let's say, actually, let's make this 20 squares one way and 13 squares the other way. Now that's going to be too much to count, right? So imagine how many squares I can fit in California. Yeah, that's going to be too much to count. So we're going to be using a formula. Formulas are basically shortcut. The nice things of a rectangle or a square is that my corners are 90-degree angles. So I'm just going to choose a corner. This is what I'm going to do. I'm going to choose a corner and I'm going to multiply those two numbers. If you notice, I could have gone 3 times 5 and I would have gotten 15. So here I will go 13 times 20 and that will give me 260, right? So it's a little bit easier. Like I said, now the idea is for us to get the formula is just for us to be able to do it faster. Counting will always work. So if you're given a figured in squares, so I could give you a figure like this, but I separate it into squares, right? Any figured, and I separate it into squares. And then I ask you, what's the area of this? We'll just count how many squares there are, and that's it. That's really it. But if you're given a rectangle, if you see this, I could have broken this into rectangles. I know formulas for rectangles to make things easier. Just get the area of each rectangle and add them up. Okay, so that's the area of rectangles. Now, parallelograms are going to look like a slanted rectangle. Going to look like this. Now, there's one pretty cool thing about a slanted rectangle. Let's say I was to get this corner here. You guys see this triangle that I created. Let's say I was to move it over here. Let's say I was to transfer my triangle. and it goes into that. So I remove this and I put it here. Like I said, let's say I was to do that. Something pretty cool that happens with parallelograms. I cut one triangle on one end and I put it on the other side. The nice thing that happens is that it will give me this shape. Now I shaded the shape in black. You guys see that it gives me a rectangle. Parallelograms, I'm going to treat it like a rectangle. Technically, I could cut one triangle one side, put it on the other side, and it makes a rectangle. Now, just like I said on the rectangle, on my figured on the left, I said, look for a 90-degree angle. And I'm going to multiply those two numbers that make the 90-degree angle. Now, when we use formulas, let's take a look at question number 2. When we use formulas, I can give you decimals. So don't expect whole numbers when we're going to be using our formulas. Now, let's take a look at question number 2. It says find the area of each. I'm going to find a 90-degree corner. It doesn't matter. I have choices. I'm going to choose this corner. It is made by the numbers 12 and 11.3. Like I said, for my homework, I'm ignoring the measurements. I'm just looking at the numbers. 12 times 11.3. It gives me 135.6. My calculator gives me 135.6. Now, don't think that in real life, all the squares are complete. If you go to your kitchen, more than likely, you're going to find some squares that are not complete. So we use decimals in real life. So my answer here will 135.6. Now, if we care about measurement, we call this feet squared. But again, for my case, I'm just looking at the number. Now, looking at the instructions, it says find the area of each. It never says round it to anything. So if I get a number that has many decimal places, I never said to round it to anything. So type in everything you get. All right, let's take a look at number 3. I'm going to choose a 90-degree corner. I'm going to choose this one. It's made by the numbers 11.3 and 6.5. So using our calculator, I go 11.3 times 6.5, and it gives me 73.45. Again, I never said round it to anything. If I said round it to the nearest tenth, then round it. If I don't say anything, don't round it. 73.45. All right, let's take a look at number 4. I said earlier, parallelograms treated like a rectangle. So look for a 90-degree angle. Here, it's right there. It's made by the numbers 10.3 and 6.7. So I'm going to multiply those numbers. 10.3 times 6.7. It gives me 69.01. Again, if your instructions only said find area, don't round it. If I said round it, then obviously round it. Now, don't think that you have to use every number given. If you notice, there's a 7.7 that I did not use. I'm only using the two numbers that make the 90-degree angle. That's it. That's only the two numbers. Now here, question number 5, I see that those dotted lines, and then my 90-degree angle is outside of the picture. But if you think about it, it is made by 9 and by 11. The 11 doesn't quite reach, so that's why the dotted line is there. So we see that, yeah, if I was to move it, it will reach the 90-degree angle. So that's what I have to multiply. Like I said, I'm looking at the 90-degree angle, and I'm looking at the two numbers that meet at that corner, 9 and 11. So I have to go 9 times 11, in this case, 99. Only multiply the two numbers that meet at the 90-degree corner. Now, to make sure that you understand what we're doing, I'm going to do this. Find the missing measurement, round your answer to the nearest tenth. So now I'm asking to round it. So round your answer to nearest tenth. Tenth sounds like the number 10, the one with 1 0. So your answer should have 1 decimal place. All right, so I know for me to get area, I will look at a 90-degree angle. So it's right here. The two numbers that meet here are 11.8 and this other side, which I don't know how big that is. Right? It's find the missing measurement. I have to find that. Every time we don't know the value of something, we replace it with a letter. So let me call this X. And then I'm told that the area is 129.8. I know that if I go 11.8 times X, if I was to multiply these two numbers, 11.8 times X, those two measurements will give me the area. And the area is 129.8. Now, my question here is, how can you get the X by itself? On the left, 11.8 times X. All right, so I would like to have the X by itself. The opposite of times is divide. So in this case, let me divide both sides by 11.8. So the X gets by itself. And then on the right side, I have 129.8 divided by 11.8. My calculator says 11. If there was a decimal, because the instructions said rounded to nearest tenth, well, then round to 1 decimal place. Cool. Now, let's take a look at number 7. I'm going to choose this 90-degree corner. The measurements are 12 and X, right? That question mark, I call it X. So I know that 12 times X will give me the area. And the area is 92.4. To get X by itself, let me divide both sides by 12. So 92.4 divided by 12, according to my calculator, is 7.7. 1 decimal place, that's okay. Let's take a look at question number 8. The 90-degree angle is right here. It's made by 6 and X. Right, that question mark, I call it X. So I know that 6 times X is equal to the area, which is 48. Right, I know the area is 48. Now let me divide both sides by 6. 48 divided by 6 is 8. So that measurement is 8 yards. All right, now here for this other parallelogram, I see my 90-degree angle here, 10.9. I'm going to go all the way through. 10.9 times X. Remember that question mark, I call it X. So I have that 10.9 times X is equal to 98.1, right? That's the area. Let me divide both sides by 10.9. Now 98.1 divided by 10.9. According to my calculator, I just get 9. Because the instructions here, it says round your answer to the nearest tenth, then round it to 1 decimal place if necessary.